The message came at 3 in the morning, ship time. Commander Jake Morrison was sleeping in his quarters when the alarm pulled him awake. He had been dreaming of Earth, of the small town in Colorado where he grew up, of mountains covered in snow. The dream faded quickly as he read the words on his screen. Emergency broadcast. All human vessels return to nearest human port immediately. This is not a drill. Jake ran to the bridge of the Starfall. His crew was already there, their faces pale in the blue light of the main screen. Dr. Lisa Warren stood at the front, her hand covering her mouth. She was watching something terrible. The screen showed the Galactic Concord Council chamber. 12 species had seats at that table. For 200 years, humanity had been one of them. Jake had grown up believing that the alliance was forever, that humans and aliens would explore the stars together until the end of time. He was wrong. High Arbiter Zython stood at the center of the chamber. He was Veloxy, a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms. His species had founded the Concord 3,000 years ago. They believed they were the wisest beings in the galaxy. They believed they knew what was best for everyone. Zython spoke in a cold voice. The charges against humanity are clear. Illegal expansion into protected territories. Dangerous genetic experiments. Attempts to influence younger species against the will of the Council. The vote has been taken, by a margin of 11-1. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Concord. Jake felt his stomach drop. 11-1. Every species had voted against them except themselves. The screen changed to show images from across the galaxy. Human embassies were being surrounded by Concord security forces. Human families were being pulled from their homes on alien worlds. Human merchants were watching their shops being closed, their goods being taken. Children were crying. Parents were shouting. Soldiers were everywhere. You have 72 hours to leave Concord space, Zython continued. Any human found after that time will be arrested and imprisoned. Your membership is revoked. Your treaties are void. You are no longer welcome among the stars. The transmission ended. The bridge was silent. Lisa turned to Jake. Her eyes were wet with tears. Why? She whispered. What did we do? Jake had no answer. He knew the charges were lies. Humanity had followed every rule, respected every border, helped every species that asked for assistance. They had been good allies, good friends. None of it mattered. The next 3 days were chaos. The Starfall was in deep space, far from any human port. Jake pushed the engines as hard as they could go, racing toward the border. Along the way, they picked up distress calls from other human ships. Some were being stopped by Concord patrols. Some were being attacked by pirates who saw opportunity in the confusion. They helped where they could. They saved 2 transport ships, full of families fleeing from a Krathani colony. They fought off a group of raiders, trying to capture a human medical vessel. They did what humans always did. They refused to give up. On Earth, the response was swift. Admiral Nathan Cross gathered the leaders of the United Human Coalition in the Great Hall at Geneva. The room was full of angry voices. Some wanted to fight back. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to beg for mercy. Cross waited until the noise died down. Then he spoke. We will not beg, he said. We will not fight. We will leave with our heads held high. We will return to our own systems, the 12 worlds we colonized before we ever met the Concord, and we will remember this day. A young officer raised his hand. Sir, what if they attack us? What if they follow us? Cross smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They will not follow us. They think we are weak. They think we needed them to survive. Let them believe that. Let them forget everything we did for them, every problem we solved, every enemy we defeated. In time, they will remember. And then, they will understand their mistake. The evacuation took months. 3 billion humans lived in Concord space. Ships flew day and night, carrying people home. Some had to leave everything behind. Homes they had built, businesses they had created, friends they had made among the alien species. Lisa Warren watched the last transport leave from the observation deck of an orbital station. A Veloxy officer stood nearby, making sure the humans left on time. Lisa had known him for years. They had worked together on research projects. She had thought they were friends. She walked over to him. "Keth," she said. "Why did you vote for this?" The Veloxy would not meet her eyes. "It was necessary," he said. "Your kind is too dangerous. You grow too fast. You adapt too quickly. You make the other species nervous. We helped you," Lisa said. "When the plague hit your colony on Vareth Prime, human doctors saved 40 million of your people, and that is why you are dangerous," Keth replied. "You are too good at everything. Too good at war. Too good at peace. Too good at making others depend on you. The council decided it was better to remove you now, before you became impossible to remove." Lisa stared at him. She wanted to argue. She wanted to shout. But she saw the fear in his eyes. And she understood. They were not being expelled because they had done something wrong. They were being expelled because they had done too much right. She turned and walked away without another word. On the Veloxy homeworld, there was celebration. In the streets of Crithani cities, people cheered. The Morthax warriors raised their glasses and drank to a future without human competition. The galaxy was free of the strange, emotional, unpredictable species from the small blue planet. They had no idea what they had done. For 200 years, humanity had played by the rules. They had held back their true capabilities, afraid of scaring their allies. They had shared only some of their technology, solved only some of their problems, shown only some of their strength. Now the rules no longer applied. In the quiet of human space, away from alien eyes, the real work began. Scientists who had been limited by Concord regulations started new experiments. Engineers who had been forced to use approved designs began building something better. Military planners who had followed alliance protocols started preparing for a future where humanity stood alone. Admiral Cross stood at the window of his office, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Concord was celebrating. They thought they had won. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. And one day, they would understand why kicking out humanity was the worst mistake they ever made. 5 years passed in silence. The Galactic Concord stopped thinking about humanity almost immediately. Humans were gone, and that was good. The 11 remaining species went back to their normal lives. Trade continued. Politics continued. The galaxy moved on without its most troublesome member. At first, everything seemed fine. Better than fine. The Veloxy celebrated their wisdom. The Crithani enjoyed having more seats at important meetings. The Morthax expanded into territories that humans had once patrolled. Everyone agreed that expelling humanity had been the right decision. Then the problem started. The first sign came 6 months after the expulsion. 3 jump gates failed in the outer rim. These ancient structures had been built by a civilization that died millions of years ago. No one knew how to fix them. No one except human engineers, who had spent decades studying the technology. The Concord sent their best scientists to repair the gates. They failed. The gates stayed broken. Travel times between those systems went from hours to weeks. Trade ships had to find new routes. Goods became expensive. People began to complain. High Arbiter Zythan told everyone to be patient. They would solve this problem without human help. They did not need humans for anything. But the problems kept coming. On the Crithani agricultural worlds, crops began to fail. The soil was dying. Crithani farmers had always struggled with their poor land. But human scientists had helped them for decades. Human soil experts had created special treatments that kept the farms productive. Now those experts were gone, and the treatments were running out. The Crithani asked the Veloxy for help. The Veloxy had no experience with farming. They asked the Morthax. The Morthax were warriors, who bought their food from others. No one in the Concord knew how to save the crops. Hunger spread across 3 Crithani colony worlds. Millions of people went without enough food. The government blamed the weather. They blamed bad luck. They blamed everyone except themselves. On the frontier, pirate attacks increased every month. Before the expulsion, human patrol ships had kept the trade routes safe. Human marines had hunted down criminal bases. Human intelligence officers had tracked smugglers and slavers across the galaxy. Now the routes were unprotected. Pirates grew bold. They attacked Concord merchant vessels in broad daylight. They kidnapped wealthy travelers for ransom. They stole cargo worth billions of credits. The Morthacs sent their warships to stop the pirates. Their warriors were brave and strong, but they were not clever. The pirates learned their patrol patterns and avoided them easily. The attacks continued. In a small apartment on the planet Nexar, Ambassador Kelly Grant watched the news reports. She had been the human ambassador to the Crithani before the expulsion. Now she lived quietly on a human colony world called New Boston, monitoring Concord communications from a distance. She saw what was happening. She saw the failure and the fear. She saw the cracks forming in the alliance that had thrown her people away. Part of her wanted to feel happy. They deserved this. They had betrayed humanity, and now they were paying the price. But Kelly was not built for hate. She thought of the Crithani children going hungry. She thought of the merchant families losing everything to pirates. She thought of the innocent people suffering because their leaders had made a terrible choice. She wrote reports and sent them to Admiral Cross. He needed to know what was happening outside human space. He needed to understand how bad things were getting. On the frontier world of Haven, a different kind of story was unfolding. Captain Danny Cole had been a Marine before the expulsion. Now he ran a refugee camp in the mountains of Haven, hidden from Concord patrols. Thousands of humans lived there. They were the ones who could not make it home in time. They were the ones who had been trapped in alien space when the borders closed. Danny protected them. He found food and medicine. He built shelters and schools. He taught the children and cared for the sick. He did everything a leader should do. He was not alone. Some aliens had refused to abandon their human friends. A Crithani doctor named Jeth worked in the camp hospital. A Veloxy merchant named Sana brought supplies when she could. They risked everything to help people that their governments had declared enemies. One night, Danny sat with Jeth outside the hospital tent. The stars were bright above them. "Why do you help us?" Danny asked. "Your people voted to throw us out." Jeth was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When I was young, I was dying. A sickness in my blood. No Crithani doctor could save me. But a human woman, a volunteer from Earth, she found a treatment. She sat by my bed for 3 weeks until I recovered. She never asked for anything in return." He looked at Danny with sad eyes. "I owe my life to humanity. I cannot forget that. Even if my government wants me to." Danny nodded. He had heard many stories like this. Humans had touched millions of lives across the galaxy. They had built friendships that politics could not destroy. That gave him hope. Far away, in human space, Admiral Cross was building something new. The Titan research station floated in the rings of Saturn. It was the most advanced laboratory in human history. And it was working on secrets that would change everything. Dr. Chris Palmer led the main project. For years, he had been forced to follow Concord regulations that limited human research. Those regulations were designed to keep humanity from advancing too quickly. Now the regulations were gone. In just 5 years, Chris and his team achieved what should have taken centuries. They created a new form of faster-than-light travel. It did not need the ancient jump gates. It did not need anything except human technology. They called it Fold Space Drive. It could take a ship anywhere in the galaxy in moments. It was better than anything the Concorde had ever seen. Chris presented his findings to Admiral Cross on a cold Tuesday morning. The Admiral studied the data in silence. Then he smiled. "How many ships can you equip with this?" Cross asked. "As many as you need," Chris replied. Cross turned to look at the shipyards visible through his window. Dozens of new vessels were being built. They were fast, strong, and deadly. They were designed for a war that had not started yet. "Start immediately," Cross said. "Something is coming. I can feel it. When it arrives, humanity needs to be ready." Chris nodded and left to begin his work. Outside human space, the silence continued. The Concorde did not know what humanity was doing. They did not care. They were too busy dealing with their own problems. Problems that grew worse every day. Zethan received reports of increasing tensions between Concord members. Old rivalries were returning. Old hatreds were waking up. Without humans to serve as a common concern, the species began to fight among themselves. He told himself everything would be fine. The Concord had existed for 3,000 years. It would survive a few difficulties. He was wrong about that too. In the darkness between galaxies, something ancient and terrible was waking up. It had destroyed civilizations before. It would destroy civilizations again. And it was coming for the Concord. The silence was about to end. The Void Collective came without warning. On a quiet morning on the Morthax homeworld, people went about their normal lives. Warriors trained in their academies. Merchants sold their goods in busy markets. Children played in the streets of ancient cities. Then the sky turned black. Thousands of ships appeared above the planet. They were enormous, each one the size of a small moon. They were made of dark metal that seemed to swallow light. They made no sound, sent no messages, offered no demands. They simply began to destroy. The first beams of energy hit the capital city. Buildings that had stood for 10,000 years turned to ash in seconds. Millions of Morthax died before they even understood what was happening. The greatest warrior civilization in the galaxy was helpless against an enemy they had never seen before. The Morthax fleet responded quickly. Their ships were famous throughout the Concord. Their weapons were powerful. Their pilots were the best trained in known space. It did not matter. The collective vessels tore through the Morthax warships like they were made of paper. Shields failed. Weapons did nothing. Ship after ship exploded in the darkness of space. The entire fleet was destroyed in 3 days. The survivors sent one final message before the planet fell silent. They are machines. They consume everything. They cannot be stopped. Tell the others. Run. Then there was only static. High Arbiter Zython received the message in his palace on the Veloxy homeworld. His 4 hands trembled as he read the reports. The Morthax were gone. Their entire civilization, billions of people, wiped out in less than a week. He had no time to mourn. The collective was already moving toward the next target. Zython called an emergency meeting of the Concord Council. The remaining 10 species gathered via hologram, their faces showing the same fear that Zython felt in his hearts. We must combine our forces, Zython said. We must stand together against this enemy. The Crithani representative shook his head. Our ships cannot match what the Morthax had. If their fleet fell, what chance do we have? We have numbers, Zython insisted. We have resources. We can find a weakness. But even as he spoke, he knew it was hopeless. The Conquered had never faced anything like this. Their military had been designed to keep peace between member species, not to fight an enemy from beyond the stars. The Veloxy sent their armada to defend the next system in the collective's path. 2,000 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled by a single Concord species. They met the enemy at the edge of the Crithani border. The battle lasted 4 hours. Zython watched the reports come in from his command center. Ship destroyed. Ship destroyed. Ship destroyed. The words repeated over and over. A terrible rhythm of death. Half the Veloxy fleet was gone before they could even retreat. The survivors brought back more information about the enemy. The collective was a machine intelligence, a network of artificial minds that had spread across millions of years. They consumed organic civilizations, using their resources to build more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. They had no mercy. They had no negotiation. They had only hunger. And their technology was centuries ahead of anything the Concord possessed. Zython sat alone in his chambers that night. He thought about all the decisions he had made. He thought about the species he had helped remove from the Alliance 5 years ago. Humans had always been strange to him, too emotional, too unpredictable, too dangerous. But they had also been clever. They had also been brave. They had also been very, very good at war. He remembered the human admiral he had met once at a diplomatic function. The man had looked at Zython with knowing eyes and said something that now echoed in the Arbiter's mind. "You should be glad we are your friends," Admiral Cross had said, because you really would not want us as enemies." Zython had laughed at the time. He was not laughing now. He knew what he had to do. It burned his pride. It shamed everything he believed about his own species. But millions were dying, and he had no other choice. He recorded a message to Earth. The recording was simple. He admitted that the expulsion had been wrong. He admitted that the charges had been false. He begged for help. He promised anything humanity wanted in return. He tried to keep his voice steady, but he could hear the fear in every word. The message was sent. Then Zython waited. On Earth, Admiral Cross received the transmission in his office at midnight. He read it 3 times before calling his senior staff together. The room filled with officers and advisors. Some of them had lost family during the expulsion. Some had lost friends. All of them had reasons to hate the Concorde. Cross played the message for them. When it finished, the room erupted in angry voices. "Let them burn," one general said. "They threw us away like garbage. Why should we save them now? We should demand territory," another suggested. "Make them pay for what they did." The arguments continued for hours. Cross listened to all of them. He understood the anger. He felt it himself. Then Dr. Beth Sanders spoke. She was a psychologist who advised the military on morale and mental health. She had lost her husband and daughter during the expulsion. A Veloxy patrol ship had fired on their transport, claiming it violated the 72-hour deadline. She had more reason to hate than anyone in the room, but her voice was calm when she spoke. "I have thought about revenge every day for 5 years," she said. "I have imagined watching their worlds burn. I have dreamed of them begging for mercy that would never come." She paused, looking around at the other officers. "But that is not who we are. That is not what makes us human. We help people. We save lives. We build things instead of destroying them. If we let them die when we could have saved them, we become something worse than they ever were." The room was quiet. Cross looked at Beth for a long moment. Then he asked for a vote. It was close. Many still wanted revenge, or at least conditions. But in the end, the majority chose mercy. Cross recorded his reply to Zython. "We are coming. Prepare your people. Humanity does not forget those who wrong us. But we also do not abandon the innocent to suffer for the sins of their leaders." The message reached the Concorde like a light in the darkness. Hope spread through the surviving species. The humans were coming. The strange, emotional, unpredictable humans were going to help them. On the refugee planet of Haven, Danny Cole received orders to prepare his people. They were going home soon. But first, there was work to do. Humans hidden throughout Concorde space would become the advanced scouts, gathering information about collective movements and weaknesses. Danny looked at the orders and smiled. Finally, he thought. Finally, we get to show them who we really are. In the shipyards of human space, the new fleet powered up its engines. Hundreds of vessels equipped with fold space drives. Technology the Concorde had never imagined. They were fast. They were powerful. They were ready. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Starfall. 5 years ago, he had fled in shame from Concorde space. Now he was going back. This time, things would be different. The collective surrounded the Krithani capital world with 300 warships. 5 billion people lived on that planet. Farmers, teachers, doctors, children. They had watched the news from other worlds. They had seen what the machines did to their victims. They knew they were going to die. The Krithani defense fleet was small. 30 ships. Most of them old and poorly armed. They took position between the enemy and their homeworld, knowing they had no chance. Their commander, a brave woman named Keth, sent one final message to her family before the battle began. "I love you. Remember me." Then the collective advanced. The first Krithani ship exploded in a ball of fire. The second followed moments later. Keth watched her fleet dying around her and prepared to give the order for a final charge. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. Then space itself seemed to tear open. Points of light appeared all around the battlefield. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Ships emerged from fold space, appearing from nowhere, surrounding the collective fleet in seconds. They were human ships. Captain Ryan Torres commanded the destroyer Defiance. He was the first to open fire. His weapons struck the nearest collective vessel, punching through its shields like they were nothing. The machine ship shuddered and began to break apart. Torres spoke into his communicator. His voice broadcast on all frequencies. Attention, collective forces. You are now fighting humanity. We suggest you reconsider your choices. The collective did not reconsider. They turned their weapons on the human fleet and fired. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships were smaller than collective vessels, but they were impossibly fast. They dodged enemy fire with movements that should have been impossible. They struck from unexpected angles, disappeared, and appeared somewhere else entirely. Their weapons found weaknesses in collective armor that the machines had never known existed. On the bridge of the Starfall, Commander Jake Morrison directed the battle with calm precision. He had been preparing for this moment for 5 years. Every simulation, every training exercise, every sleepless night had led to this fight. Focus fire on their command ships, he ordered. Take out their coordination, and the smaller vessels will become easier targets. Dr. Lisa Warren worked at the science station, analyzing collective signals in real time. The machines communicated through a complex network, sharing information faster than any organic species could manage. But Lisa had found patterns in their code, weaknesses in their connections. There, she said, pointing at a cluster of enemy ships. That vessel is relaying commands to the entire Eastern Formation. Destroy it, and they will lose coordination for at least 30 seconds. Morrison smiled. That is all we need. All ships. Target the relay vessel. Fire everything. The human fleet concentrated its weapons on a single point. The collective ship vanished in a massive explosion. Immediately, the machines in that sector began moving erratically, bumping into each other, firing wildly at nothing. The humans pressed their advantage. In the confusion, they destroyed 20 more enemy vessels before the collective could restore their network. On the Krythani homeworld, people watched the battle on screens in every city. They saw the human ships dancing through the darkness. They saw the machines falling one by one. They saw hope returning to their world. Some of them cried, some of them cheered. Many simply stood in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. The humans had come back. After everything the Concord had done to them, the humans had come back to save them. Captain Torres led his squadron directly into the heart of the enemy formation. His ship took heavy damage, but he kept pushing forward. The collective flagship was there, the largest vessel in their fleet. If he could destroy it, the battle would be over. His weapons officer shouted a warning. Sir, our shields are failing. We cannot survive another hit. Torres looked at the flagship. It was so close. He thought about his family back on Earth. His wife. His children. He thought about what they would want him to do. All hands, abandon ship, he ordered. Get to the escape pods. I will finish this alone. His crew protested, but he gave them no choice. He sealed the bridge and sent them to safety. Then he aimed his crippled destroyer at the enemy flagship and pushed the engines to maximum. The Defiance struck the flagship at full speed. The explosion was visible from the surface of the Krythani world. 30 million people saw the flash of light that marked the death of a hero. The collective fleet broke and retreated. The battle was over. The Krythani homeworld was saved. But the war was far from finished. On the ground, human Marines landed to help defend key positions. The collective had already put troops on several Concord worlds, machine soldiers that moved without fear and fought without mercy. Sergeant Megan Price led a mixed unit of humans, Veloxi and Krythani soldiers. They had been thrown together by chance when their original units were destroyed. Now they fought side by side against an enemy that wanted to kill them all. Price did not speak much Veloxi or Krythani. Her translator was broken, damaged in an earlier battle. But she found ways to communicate. Hand signals, drawn pictures, shared looks of understanding. When a collective assault nearly overwhelmed their position, Price grabbed a Veloxi soldier and pushed him behind cover just before an explosion would have killed him. The Veloxi looked at her with surprise in his strange eyes. Price just smiled and pointed at the enemy. Less talking, more shooting. The Veloxi seemed to understand. He raised his weapon and joined her in the fight. They held the position for 3 days, waiting for reinforcements. They ran low on food, water, and ammunition. They took turns sleeping in shifts of 2 hours. They watched friends die and kept fighting anyway. When the human dropships finally arrived to evacuate them, only half the original group remained. Price helped the wounded onto the transport, carrying a Krithani soldier who had lost both legs in the fighting. As the ship lifted off, the Krithani grabbed her hand. "Thank you," he said in broken human language. "You did not have to save me." Price shook her head. "Yes, I did. That is what we do. Across the galaxy." Similar stories played out on 100 worlds. Humans fighting beside aliens who had once voted to exile them. Humans dying to protect people who had cheered when they were thrown out of the Concord. They did not fight for revenge. They did not fight for territory. They fought because it was right. They fought because innocent people were dying. They fought because that was who humanity was. On the Starfall, Dr. Lisa Warren made a breakthrough. She had been studying collective communications for weeks, and she had finally found something important. They have a central node, she told Morrison, a main processing center that coordinates their entire network. If we can destroy it, every collective ship in the galaxy will shut down at once. Morrison felt hope surge in his chest. "Where is it?" Lisa's face fell. "That is the problem. It is hidden inside a dying star. The radiation levels are so high that no ship could survive long enough to reach it." Morrison looked at the data she had gathered. No Concorde ship could survive those conditions. Their technology was not designed for such extremes. But human ships were different. Human engineers had always built things to survive the impossible. Human crews had always found ways to accomplish what could not be done. He picked up his communicator and contacted Admiral Cross. "Sir, we have found a way to end this war. But it will require a sacrifice." Cross listened to the plan in silence. Then he asked one question. "How many volunteers do you have?" Morrison looked around the bridge of the Starfall. Every member of his crew was watching him. Every one of them already knew what he was going to ask. Every one of them nodded. "All of them, sir," Morrison replied. "Every single one." 17 ships gathered at the edge of the dying star. The radiation was already intense at this distance. Warning lights flashed on every bridge. Sensors showed temperatures and energy levels that should have been impossible to survive. The star was collapsing, consuming itself in a process that would eventually create a black hole. Somewhere inside that inferno was the collective's central node, the brain of the machine invasion. The only target that mattered. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Starfall and looked at his crew. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they would probably not return. They had said goodbye to their families, written their final letters, made their peace with death. Now they were ready. Dr. Lisa Warren worked at her station, calculating the best path through the star's outer layers. Her hands were steady, but Morrison could see the fear in her eyes. She was brilliant, brave, and terrified. Just like all of them, Chief Engineer Adam Blake reported from the engine room. "Shields are at maximum. Engines are stable. We can do this, Commander. We can make it." Morrison nodded. He did not believe they would all survive. But he believed they could succeed. That was enough. He opened a channel to the other ships. "All vessels, this is Morrison. You know why we are here. You know what we need to do. Some of us will not make it back. But if we succeed, the war ends today. Billions of lives will be saved. That is worth any price." He paused, looking at the burning star ahead. "It has been an honor to serve with you. Now let us show the galaxy what humanity is made of." The fleet moved forward into the fire. The heat was immediate and overwhelming. Shields that could withstand weapons Fire began to weaken against the raw power of a star. Ships started taking damage before they had even reached the outer layers. The first vessel was lost within minutes. Its shields failed, and the radiation tore through the hull. There was no explosion. The ship simply dissolved. Consumed by the star's fury, its crew died instantly. Morrison watched it happen and forced himself to keep going. The collective had defenses inside the star. Automated weapons platforms that fired at anything that approached the central node. The human ships dodged and returned fire while trying to survive the impossible environment. Another ship fell. Then another. The fleet was shrinking, but they pushed deeper into the inferno. On the starfall, systems began to fail. Secondary shields went down. Backup power flickered. The temperature inside the ship climbed higher and higher despite everything the cooling systems could do. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead and kept working. I am tracking the node. It is dead ahead, maybe 3 minutes at current speed. 3 minutes, Morrison thought. 3 minutes in this hell. An eternity. Blake's voice came over the intercom, strained but determined. Commander, I can give you more speed, but it will burn out the engines. We will not be able to retreat. Morrison did not hesitate. Do it. The starfall surged forward, leaving the remaining ships behind. They were the fastest, the strongest, the best equipped. If anyone was going to reach the node, it was them. More ships died in their wake. Brave crews who had come to buy them time, to clear a path, to give them every chance of success. Morrison whispered a prayer for each one. Then they saw it. The central node was a massive structure floating in the heart of the star. It was made of the same dark metal as the collective ships, but it glowed with an inner light that seemed wrong, unnatural. Cables of energy connected it to the star itself, drawing power from the dying sun. This is it, Lisa said. Destroy that, and the collective dies. Morrison looked at the node and then at his crew. The ship was falling apart around them. Half the systems were offline. The shields would fail in less than a minute. He made his decision. All hands, abandon ship, he ordered. Get to the escape pods. Now. The crew hesitated. Commander, one officer said, the pods cannot survive this environment for long. Long enough for another ship to pick you up, Morrison replied. Go. That is an order. They began to move toward the exits. But Lisa and Blake stayed at their stations. Morrison turned to them. That means you too, Lisa shook her head. Someone has to guide the ship into the target. The autopilot is damaged. You cannot do this alone, Blake nodded. And someone has to keep the engines running until impact. I am not leaving. Morrison wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in their eyes. They had made their choice. Just as he had made his. They would see this through together. The escape pods launched, carrying the rest of the crew away from the doomed ship. Morrison watched them go, and hoped they would make it. Then he turned to face the central node. Take us in, he said quietly. The starfall accelerated toward the massive structure. Collective weapons fired at them. But the ship was moving too fast. Too determined. The hull began to buckle. Fire broke out on 3 decks. The bridge filled with smoke. Lisa reached over and took Morrison's hand. It has been an honor, Commander. He squeezed her hand. The honor was mine. Blake's voice came over the failing intercom, barely audible through the static. Impact in 10 seconds. It has been a good run. Friends. Morrison closed his eyes and thought of Earth. He thought of the mountains in Colorado, covered in snow. He thought of his parents, his sister, everyone he was leaving behind. He thought of all the people they were saving. The starfall struck the central node at full speed. The explosion was visible across 3 star systems. A flash of light that burned brighter than the dying star itself. Energy waves rippled outward, carrying the death cry of the machine intelligence. Across the galaxy, every collective ship went silent. Their weapons stopped firing. Their engines shut down. They drifted in space like dead things. Their connection to their hive mind severed forever. The war was over. On 100 worlds, people who had been fighting for their lives suddenly found themselves standing in silence. The enemy was gone. They had survived. High Arbiter Zithan received the news in his command center on the Veloxy homeworld. He sat down heavily, unable to believe it. The humans had done it. They had sacrificed themselves to save everyone. He thought about Jake Morrison, the commander who had led the final mission. He thought about the 17 crews who had flown into a dying star. He thought about what humanity had given so that the galaxy could live. Tears ran down his silver face. He had been wrong about them. He had been wrong about everything. 2 weeks later, Zithan traveled to Earth. He walked through the streets of the human capital, past crowds of people who watched him with mixed emotions. Some were angry. Some were sad. Some simply did not know what to feel. He came to a memorial being built in a great plaza. 17 ships were carved in stone, circling a central flame that would burn forever. Names were being added to the walls. Morrison, Warren, Blake, Torres, all the humans who had died to save a galaxy that had rejected them. Zithan knelt before the memorial. His guards tried to stop him, but he waved them away. "I am sorry," he said to the stone. "I am sorry for what we did. I am sorry for what it cost you." Admiral Cross stood nearby, watching. He walked over and helped the alien leader to his feet. "We did not come back for apologies," Cross said. "We came back because it was right." Zithan looked at him with ancient eyes. "We want to offer humanity leadership of the Concord. You have earned it." Cross considered the offer for a long moment. Then he spoke. "We will accept, but only on one condition. No species will ever be expelled again. The Concord will be a true alliance, where everyone is equal, where everyone is welcome." Zithan nodded. "It will be done." On the refugee world of Haven, Danny Cole watched the announcement on a small screen. Around him, the humans he had protected for 5 years cheered and embraced each other. They were going home at last. Danny thought of Morrison, Warren, and Blake. He had known them all, served with some of them. They were gone now, but what they had done would live forever. The stars were quiet that night. The collective was destroyed. The Concord was healing. Humanity had proven something that the galaxy would never forget. They were the species that ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. They were the ones who built bridges with those who had burned them. They were the light in the darkness, the hope when all seemed lost, and they would never stop being exactly who they were. In his office on Earth, Admiral Cross stood at the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, new challenges waited. New enemies would rise. New crises would come, but humanity would be ready. They always were, because that was what it meant to be human.